Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Morning Coffee and a Thought. I've got my coffee here. I hope you have yours. My late wife, Beverly, was afflicted growing up with dyslexia, and so she never saw the page of a book or the blackboard at school the same way that her classmates saw it. And I know she always regarded that as a curse growing up because it made school a real struggle for her. But as she grew into womanhood, what was a curse in her childhood turned out to be a blessing as she grew up, because not only did she view objects and writing differently and with a different lens than other people, but as she grew up, she viewed people themselves differently. She saw them through a different lens. And so Bev was very attracted and driven to people who would be socially challenged, people who others would walk away from, Bev would gravitate to. And it reminds me a lot of Christ. Christ seemed to be a magnet for those who were socially challenged in Israelite society. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. First of all, we want to remind you that Morning Coffee and a Thought can be seen every Friday beginning at 1 o'clock on our YouTube channel, and every Sunday morning on our Facebook page between the hours of 8 and 9. Also, if you have a prayer request, if you want information, or you want to make a donation to this ministry, you can do all of that at wingsoffaithministries.ca. Now back to our thought. In Luke 15, the chapter begins with the type of people Jesus was attracting to himself. Luke tells us that the religious authorities, the Pharisees and the scribes, looked at the people who were coming to hear Jesus, who he was fellowshipping with, who he was eating with, and in their mind, these people were the social outcasts, tax collectors, and, in quotation marks, sinners. Those people who maybe had occupations that weren't desirable in the eyes of the religious establishment. But these were the people that were coming to Jesus. These were the ones he was associating with and eating with. And it was a real burr to them that he would do that as a rabbi. And so in Luke 15, Jesus addresses their concerns with three parables. The first parable is about a lost sheep. The second parable about a lost coin and a lady searching to find it. And the final parable is the one that I want to concentrate on this morning. The parable is about a father and two sons. The younger son came to the father and asked him if he would divide the property between the two boys. Now the oldest son would have gotten 2/3 of the property, because that was the tradition in an Israelite family, that a son, oldest son, would get the double portion. So the father agrees to do that. And in Jesus' parable, he says, not many days after the division of property, the younger son left home. He wanted to experience life. And so he took his share of the estate. And the parable says he went to a distant country. In other words, outside the safe zone of Israel. And there it says he spent the money on reckless living. When all the money was gone, it seemed like the perfect storm against the young lad. Not only was his money gone, but a famine had hit the area. And now nobody in that country had really much of anything. And so now he was desperate. He was out of money. There would be no gleaning possibilities, because in a famine, that agriculture, in agricultural countries, the property owners would make sure that they gleaned all the crops on the estate. And so the parable says that nobody would give him anything. He hired himself out to a farmer who sent him out to feed pigs. And there, as he watched the pigs eat the carob seeds, his heart wished for just something to eat. But it's at that point when he hits bottom that he comes to his senses. And he thought to himself, my father's servants have plenty of food to spare, and here I am starving to death in a distant country. I'm going to go back to my dad. I'm not worthy to be called his son, but I could maybe be hired on as a servant. At least I would have something to eat. And so he heads back home. But this is the part of the parable that I want to center on. When he comes home, he is looked at from two different lenses, the lenses of the father and the lenses of his older brother. When his father sees him coming home from a long way off, the father quickly runs to him, wraps his arms around him, kisses the son. The son begins to tell his father how sorry he is, that he has sinned against his Father in heaven. But the father won't hear anymore. He quickly gets the best robe, puts it on his son, gets a ring and puts it on his finger, and puts sandals on his feet. Then he kills the fattened calf and has a feast with the family. He is grateful and jubilant because his son, who was lost, had now returned home. That's how the father saw it. The older brother saw it entirely differently. He looked at that younger brother and thought, he wasted my dad's goods, had the time of his life, lived recklessly, and now he comes home because he's in need. He refused to go in and enjoy the celebration with the rest of the servants and the family. His father had to come out to him and plead with him to join in the celebration. But the son had a different view of things. He says, I've worked for you all of my life, and you never gave me a feast. The point that Jesus was trying to make in the parable was how we can see people with two entirely different lenses. We are going to be offended in life. And we're going to have people we don't agree with. But it's how we view them with our eyes. The father had been wronged by that younger son. The boy had recklessly spent the property that his father had given him. And yet his father saw him through the lens of both compassion, love, and forgiveness. The elder brother, not so much. All he saw was the behavior of that younger brother, and he couldn't get over it. Jesus was trying to describe the difference between his view of the people he was associating with and the lens that the Pharisees were looking at these same people. Today, as we look at our society, we have become very tribal. If people don't agree with us or see things exactly the way we do, if their behavior doesn't match our standards, if they're not living the life that we think they should be living, all of a sudden, like that older brother, we can become very judgmental and look through them through that type of lens. Or we can look at them with the same lens that the father saw the son, a lens of love, compassion, and forgiveness. As believers, we are called to act and behave and to see through the same lens that Christ sees people. Christ has forgiven us for much that we have done in our lives, and we have to be willing to have the same compassion, understanding, love, and forgiveness for those around us, people in the margins. That's my thought with you today. What type of lens are we viewing our fellow man with? The lens of a judgment or the lens of love, compassion, and forgiveness? Have a good morning, enjoy your coffee, and we'll see you next week.